So develop custom workflow activities. First of all, let's get an understanding of custom workflow activities. So out of the box workflows or dialogues that we have in CRM has limitations in terms of functionality, right? So they can be triggered only for a limited number of operation or events, and also, I mean, there he can add a limited number of steps. If I go to my processes, right? So custom workflow activities are used in order to extend the functionality of your out-of-the-box workflows and dialogues. For example, if I open this workflow, you can see if you go to add steps, these are the number of steps you can add up to here. Check condition, conditional branch, wait condition, create, update, assign records, send email, start child workflow. So 10 or 12 steps you can do. But in there are situations where we need to do some steps which is not available here. For example, I need to check in a workflow, within a workflow, I need to check what is the number of child opportunity that a opportunity has, or what is the number of contact that a account has. So writing plugin we can easily do it, but what I need to do is such kind of a functionality need to be available here, because if an account has more than 100 contacts, then it's a big customer. If the number of accounts is less than 100 contacts, then it's a small customer. Some kind of functionality you need to do. So that check you need to do here, right? The count is more than 100, then you need to do the operation here itself. So you cannot trigger that for a plugin, right? You need to get here. So in such situation, what you need to do, you will write code. You need to write .NET code, make it DLL, and add it at a step. So after that, a step will appear here. Here you can see, right, task custom activity. Like this, it will be available to you. Give me a second. Yeah. So this part below this line, what is seeing here is nothing but your custom steps. So if I go here, WOC, that means voice of customer. That is a additional package that I have added. You can see that. So that assembly contain 6 steps. So any of the step I can just add like this. Same way that you add a standard step, I can add a step here also, right? Then the input parameter I can give by set properties. So this is how it will appear. Okay. So that's what we are going to do here. So out of the box workflows and dialog can be extended using writing custom code. So you can write your custom code in C# or VB.NET. So here what we'll do is, in plugin we create a class, right, and that class will implement iPlugin interface. So here what we do, we will write a class again that will extend, or in a different way I can say that extends is the word. We will make a child class. Our class will be the child class of the code activity class. System.code activity class we will extend using our base class. So the development of custom workflow activities has 3 steps. First of all, you will develop your class in Visual Studio, or in a more specific I can say that you will create a class library project type where we'll write one class, then that class will extend your code activity class, then you will build the DLL, register it with your CRM server, just like same way you register your plugin, and debugging also the same. So only in the development part there is a little difference is there. Concept is also somewhat similar. So now we'll create a class that inherits from code activity or workflow base class. This class is available in system.activities namespace. And now the activity that inherit from the code activity class can override the execute method. In plugin we used to implement the execute method of the iPlugin interface, right? So here what we'll do is we will override the execute method of the code activity class. So, and we will use the reference xrm.sdk.dll, that is a common one, and this one also we use additionally xrm.workflow.dll, because this is a custom workflow activity. Yeah. Now the other additional thing that we have is input and output parameter. So here is the difference between custom workflow activity and plugin. So plugins normally use as event handlers. So they need to be register with a CRM core operation, right? Create of account. So we'll create a plugin, register with your CRM system. After that, we'll create a plugin step. That plugin step is nothing but the registration between the assembly and the CRM core operation. So whenever the core operation happen, the plugin will trigger. So if you register a plugin in CRM system without creating a step, it won't trigger. Step is needed. Other the assembly would be there, it won't trigger. That's the registration. So in terms of customer flow activity, we don't need a step because customer flow activities will be added on workflow. So workflow will trigger so that it will trigger the step also. So there is no step is needed in workflow. But if you want to pass some values to the step, what you need to use a input parameter, and if you want to get any output from the step, you need to use a output parameter. So these two are optional. This is very similar to how you call a method using parameters, passing parameters, and return the value from that method. Same way. So passing parameters to a method and returning a value from the method is optional. Same concept here. So we'll make an input parameter and output parameter. So we have donut attribute as input and output that we will use. So here are some examples of how you write input parameter. For example, if you want to make a input of type decimal, we'll write input decimal, output decimal output, or default value means this will be the default value. After that, we will define it, that input argument, public int out argument, decimal decimal, like this we will mention. So here we mention input output because we have input also I have mentioned, output also I have mentioned. These are three separate lines. If I need only input, I will mention only this one. So in that case, this out keyword wouldn't be there. In argument decimal decimal that we mentioned. Same way, if you mention just output parameter, this is the way. Output credit, that's the name of it, credit score. After that, you will mention public out argument. This is the type, credit score. So this credit score is equivalent to this one. So here you declare it as output parameter, then you define it. Okay, don't worry, this is nothing but standard line of code. Okay, so what we'll do is I will open up one solution which is a custom workflow activity. So this is nothing but a class library. Okay, or maybe I can, what I can do is I can create a new project, Visual Studio class library. I'll copy paste the code here. So these are the assemblies I need to add: system.activities, Microsoft.xrm.sdk, Microsoft.sdk, xrm.sdk.workflow. So let me add them first. System.activities.
We created a normal assembly project, right?
Yeah, normal assembly project. Class library. Yeah, class library project. Same as you creating a plugin. Okay. So where is the difference comes, I will tell you. And we will select this to sdk.workflow.dll. This is a normal one, sdk.prox. No, this is not needed. Workflow.xrm. So this is you will get from recent one. You don't need to select it again. All three added. Now you will develop a class. So where we will mention this is the name of your class, right? Custom activity that will inherit. So in plugin we used to implement this one, right? This class will implements iPlugin. So here I am going to inherit it. Inheritance. Like code activities are. So you can check the code activity class. That is from system.activity to code activity, not from xrm.sdk. After that, you need to override it because we are inheriting it. We are not implementing here on customer flow activity. So the structure, everything is the same. Only thing that here we will take code activity context as the parameter instead of iService provider parameter. So you can again see system.activity.code activity context. This is a class. iService provider in plugin was a interface. Yeah, so this code activity context will give you the context needed for your workflow. Now after that, I will create the context iWorkflow context. So this is only difference. iWorkflow context equal to execution context. That is this parameter, gets extension of iWorkflow context. Then we'll create iService factory. Service factory is equal to execution dot get extension of iOrganization service factory. Then we'll create the service object from service factory. All these are same and these are standard code. Now, before I explain the logic here, so what is the logic here is very similar to the plugin that we created. Once an account is created, one task will be created and the task will have the subject line of the task is equal to the account ID plus some text here. Okay, so before explaining that one, I will go through the input and output arguments. We need to define it. So here I am defining input entity. This is the name I am going to give. So this is a custom name. Okay. Then I am mentioning the type here, reference target. So basically reference target means this input entity is nothing but an entity reference. Okay. So that is, it will contain the GUID of the account. That's what it's basically saying. Then I am defining it, public int argument. This is just input. So I have int argument, out argument, in out argument. Both are there. Both can be combined also. So here I'm mentioning public int argument, entity reference. That's a type of this input argument, input entity. So here you define it, input entity, the name you mentioned, that name you are mentioning here. So now it's become a, once I mention like this, it's become a public input variable or input argument. So here I am mentioning required argument, so that this is a required field now. If I don't mention it, for example, output, I didn't mention it. It will be an optional thing. In fact, mentioning all these two input and output arguments are optional. Now I have an optional output argument, which the name I have given as task created. The type I have mentioned as reference target task. This is the reference, referring that one. Type I have mentioned here, public out argument, entity reference, task creator. So task creator also I have defined here as output. Is a reference to a task and type is entity reference. So this is basically standard line of code. Or what is differ here is this name will change here, this type will change here, and this, only these three things will change. Obviously this will be, if you want to refer it, you need to change, otherwise you can simply delete this one. If it's not referring anything, to only this much, we'll mention the name and then you will define it as a input argument. So now what we are doing is we mention input and output argument, and here what we are doing is we are reading the value of the account ID, that is from here I'm reading it, and then I'm creating a task, and that task I will assign to one account. That's what you are seeing. So how you'll read the input argument, that's what we are doing here in this line. This is also standard line. So only thing change here is the input argument name, input entity dot get execution context. Once you write this line, you will read the input argument. The name of the input argument dot get of execution context. So here I am getting an ID, so account ID I am reading it. Then I am creating a task activity, entity task equal to entity, task dot logical name equal to task of subjects equal to, I am assigning the account ID that I have read, some text, task for account, some custom code I am mentioning here. Yeah. Then task of regarding object ID that we have sent last time. The regarding field of the task is set to the account ID and the account type, or nothing but the lookup field. Yeah, after that I'm creating the task service.create of task. So a task will be created, the task ID will be available here. Now I need to set the output parameter. That's what I'm doing here. Task created is the output parameter I have here, right? It will contain the GUID. So task created dot set execution context, and I am mentioning the value here. So why it is a little confusing here is because this is a GUID. For example, if my task created is of type string, okay, instead of here it is a string, imagine, then I don't need to write this line. Instead I need to write some string line here. Yeah, only this much it would be. I'm giving the execution context because I'm setting the output parameter, then I'm giving the value. Since it is an entity, this one of type entity reference, I need to write a line like this, and I need to make a lookup field of task and the task ID. Yeah, otherwise it is simpler. Okay, so we read the value, did the operation, finally I put the result on the output parameter. Cool. So after that we need to do the other things that we need to do. First of all, we need to sign the assembly. We signed it. Next thing is we need to select target framework as 4.5.2. Yeah, then we need to build it. This failed because we did add runtime serialization. Yeah, wonder system.runtime. I will go to the project, open folder in File Explorer, go to the bin, go to the debug. So we have the DLL created. Okay. Now registering part is very similar to how you do with plugin. So let's quickly do that. This is a existing one. So what I'm going to do is I need to unregister this one. Oh, I cannot unregister this. Okay, so let me register the new one. Register new assembly. Go to the debug folder. Select the custom task activity DLL. Then the same step. One assembly registered, one plugin registered. It will show plugin only here because the tool is still showing that like that. Basically, it's a custom workflow activity. So here you have it installed here. Now, unlike plugin, you don't need to create a step here. We are done. Now, where we use it, we need to implement that on a workflow or a dialog. So we'll come to settings, processes, and whichever plugin we need to use it, we need to find out one workflow. Yeah, call workflow. I think here I'm using that one. Okay, so let's use this workflow. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to call my step from here. So in a normal scenario, you will have multiple steps. In between, you are going to call this custom step also. So now if you look at here, you have your task created. Custom activity 1. This is the one you just created. Look at here. This is assembly name and this is the step or the class. If you had added multiple classes in that assembly, you will get it. So now how this name came, where this name came, that you can change it in the plugin registration tool. We'll have an option for properties. Here we'll get it. So this is that name, workflow activity group name. So this name you can change. Before registering you have to change it. So this name you can give any name. Okay, and this is the name of the step. So here it is showing the complete assembly name, the assembly name, and this is the group name. So that I can change. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, assembly name and the group name. Yeah, that you can change. So I will select this one. Then you have an input parameter, right? So you click on set properties. Here you can see it is required input entity. That is a name you have mentioned. This is a required field. So this should be account ID, right? So I will select account. So if the workflow is running on a lead record, so what you can do is you can go to the related entity section. From there you can select the account. So here I'm directly selecting the account. Yeah, set it. So I like this. If I had multiple input argument, I can set all of them there, right? So I set it. Now once I trigger the workflow, so this workflow must be triggering on account, I believe. Yeah, this is triggering on creation of account. It will trigger, it will call the workflow and it will do the operation, and the output parameter will be set on task created. Now how you read the output parameter, that's what we are going to do here. So here, for example, I will use any of the. So basically this custom workflow activity will create a task, right? So we can check that task. I'm going to check the status of that task. So here in the as a local variable you can see call custom activity task created. So now you can see the details of it. So this is nothing but the attributes of the task that you created while the account is created by the custom workflow activity. So I can check if the account status equal to open, for example, as a condition. So you can see, so this is the name of the step call custom activity. So call custom activity colon task created, that is nothing but the output of your custom workflow activity. So now I can do any operation on that. I can set like update record. I can again select the entities created by the steps. Activity status completed. Here I can, if whatever changes I mean to change, I can just set it. Cool. So we complete the workflow. So we added the step. Now what we'll do is we will trigger that workflow so that the step will also be triggered and it will do its operation. So in order to trigger the workflow, I will create one account record. Still it is profile that will be showing here. Yeah, the account got created, account to trigger custom task. Now if you go to activity, you can see, I mean, there will be a plugin also triggered. That's why you are seeing it. Two plugins triggered, and this is created by your custom task. So basically in the code you have mentioned task of subjects equal to task for account colon the account ID, right? So that's what it is. Task for account is created, and now you can see the status got completed. By default, when a task is created, it will be of, type open. Sorry, it will be a status open, but as the workflow is triggered, it is changed the status into completed. And also you can see the regarding the account is set. So we can check that from the workflow also. We'll go to the account record, go to background processes. So you can see workflow to call custom activity. So the workflow is triggered. Once you check the workflow, you can see it is called the custom workflow activity. You can see it. So our custom workflow activity is triggered and it is triggered fine. Then you are checking the ID of the task created. If the status of the task is created as open, so it is changing that into completed. Yeah. So workflow is triggered and custom activity also triggered. So that's how you will develop a customer flow activity and add it to your dialog or workflow. Same way I can add it to a dialog also as a step. So this is how you'll do. So any questions on this?
No practice.
Yeah. So I will share the video also. So basically where we use, I made it to maximum symbol, where you'll use it in situation where you need to do certain operation within the workflow, right? I mean, where we need a custom action.
Yeah.
Like I example say, if you want to check the count of the child opportunities of an opportunity within the workflow, either you can directly do it on a plugin, that is an easy thing. But if you want to do such an operation for a checking or something, if the count is more than, so you need to find the count, then you within workflow you can check using check condition. You can check if the count is more than 10 or 100, whatever. In such situation we will do it. Yeah. So where we can pass the input argument and also get the result.